Now we're going to move to the gist of our event and speak to a number of astonishing individuals who have experience not only in the Middle East, but also in Australia and around the world. Our first speaker is Adam Malouf, who is a C-suite senior executive, CIO, COO, and CFO, and a non-executive director who's lived and worked across the Middle East and North Africa region for about 18 years. And he's just flown back from Sydney this morning to Dubai. So we really appreciate him managing the locations and time zones. Our second speaker is Jonathan Berry, who comes from a legal background, having trained and qualified as a solicitor in the UK. He moved to Sydney, Australia, to join Robert Walters in their legal compliance division. And then Jonathan left Sydney office and transferred up to Dubai and headed up the Middle East legal practice and is now associate director at head of legal and compliance. And our third speaker is Abdullah Alghamdi, who has years of management and business experience in Saudi Arabia and Australia. He's the founder and managing director of KD International, an Australian Saudi Arabian educational enterprise that promotes and supports Australian institutions internationally. He's also the co-founder of Rockmiyun, who provide advertising services, and a partner of Ozzy Cafe in Riyadh. So if you're ever going to Riyadh and would like to have an Ozzy Cafe, please do visit Ozzy Cafe. Their beans are exported all the way from Sydney. So let's get started. We're going to run through some questions and ask you wonderful people to address them. Let's start with Adam. How important is it to build lasting relationships and establishing trust and rapport across regions?
Thank you, Raymond. A quick thank you to everyone who has been involved in making this happen today. I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I hope that it will continue long beyond today's session. Relationships are critical. Relationships are everything in this region. Without relationships, nothing will happen. You cannot do anything at all. This is not a region which is transactional in nature. Transactions may result from relationships which are built over years and decades, but they don't happen out of the blue. So anyone who thinks that, and I've been having a lot of these conversations in Australia with people looking to do things out here, that you can come here and pitch what you want to do and expect someone to write a check. It won't happen. And I'm very adamant and blunt about that because I've seen too many people and too many organisations, some of which are quite sophisticated and professional, not only in Australia but globally, try to do that here. And it just simply is not the way things are done. I think to understand why, you've got to look at how the region works from a cultural perspective. Everything is about personal rapport, personal relationships. If you can get along with someone on a personal level, and I'm actually going through this now with a board that I sit on, looking to bring someone else onto that board. And I said to this person, if I can't get along with you personally, well, then how can I get along with you professionally? It just will not help anybody. So yeah, when I go and meet people here, when I interact with people, first and foremost, it's about personal, but very much about family. And that's a big part of how people interact in this part of the world. Once you've established that, and there isn't a magic formula for it, by the way, it's unique to every relationship you have. Once you've established that, then the matters of business, the matters of actually collaborating from a commercial perspective, actually just come naturally. There's no need, from what I've seen, to have to force it, to have to somehow artificially manifest something to make business happen. It's just a natural extension of the relationship you have with a person or with a number of people within an organization. So in short, relationships. It's like in property, it's location. It's the same thing in terms of those from Australia who want to do things in this region.
Thanks, Adam. And just reminding people that if they do have a question for any of the speakers, just pop them in the live Q&A session and we'll come back to them. And thanks for addressing that, Adam. Jonathan, like we've had a lot of travel restrictions throughout the last few years. So how can people network across boundaries and borders when these kind of restrictions come into play?
Yeah, so I completely and wholeheartedly agree with what Adam's just said. I mean, I've been in the region now for 5 years, and it is very traditional, really, in the ways that relationships and business is done, which obviously therefore has had a few issues over the last few years where the shake of the hand, the look in the eye, the old school way of building those relationships hasn't been possible. People haven't been able to get on planes. Now, fortunately, technology has made the world a very small place, and things such as social platforms like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really the #1 business platform now. And it was big in the last 5-10 years, but I would say during COVID, it has really, really accelerated. So the way that people network now really does stem from that as a platform. So real bits of advice are make sure that your LinkedIn profile is, the basics are done. You've got a very clear professional picture. You've got a headline around what you do. And then on the back of that, once that's set up, that's when you can use that as a basis to start networking and reaching out to people in your target market or whoever you're trying to contact. So without that, it just doesn't work. I mean, I get approached by literally hundreds of people a day who, if you don't even have a job title, you don't have a picture, there is no want or desire for me to come back to you, whatever you're offering, selling, whatever it may be. Whereas if you've got a very clear professional profile, you're reaching out to a very targeted individual, there's a tailored message around that. So again, the days of spamming messages, it just doesn't work at all. It's got to be very tailored. It's got to be, also, you're offering something to them. It's not just me. So, hi, I'm looking to network. Can you help me? It should be at some form of mutual benefit for both of you, or offer something to them. Take that time to look at individuals' profiles, to research them, to see if they've cropped up in the news, to look at if there's any icebreakers. You may have been to the same university. You may have been on the same course. All that type of stuff really shows that you've taken the time to really approach the right person, offer them something correctly that you think that is going to be a mutual benefit to both of you. That is the way really that you're going to be successful outside of the old school going just meeting people.
Great. So people update your LinkedIn. That's a very important point there. Thanks, Jonathan. Abdullah, what role has networking played in your management and business experience between Saudi Arabia and Australia?
First, thanks, Reem, for organizing such an event. It's wonderful to everyone here and to exchange experiences and ideas. To answer your question, is key factor. Before in Australia, my journey started in 2009. Since then, I started building my network around Australia, around Saudi Arabia, in terms of my relationship around education. With that goal in mind, I started my job at one of the major universities in Australia. From there, I built up my network to make sure that I can know and meet people who have the same interests, who share the same goals, objectives, so I can work with them. We work together to achieve our mutual goals. We international back in 2016. When I started that, it was clear to me that the relationship I built in the market was really my asset into building that business. So you meet people with the same objective, and so you can learn more and know what's the pain in that market, so you can solve it, which help us later on succeed in the business and make major change in the market, where we interact with the student groups and network with them. At the same time, we have a good relationship. Even though we started during rough times, which was 2016, wasn't the best time for our Saudi market to be established. But however, we managed to work on tailored specific groups where we can build our network and our business in the industry.
Thank you, Abdullah. That's interesting to know. Adam, coming back to you, what would the power and impact of tight-knit, broad networks be in facilitating meaningful businesses?
So when I think it comes to networks, I mean, there would be, I'd say, 3 levels of networks. They're at a very high level, and you can look at it, it's like a funnel. You have your very broad, general, expansive network, which covers people who you might know well, some who you're just an acquaintance with, but it will cover different industries, different geographies. Then you go to the next level down, it's a little bit more focused, maybe in your specific industry, but it's still reasonably large. Then you come down to sort of the pointy end of your network, which is your people, your groups that you communicate with quite frequently. And this could be, you see them, you talk to them on the phone, you're on WhatsApp with them. These are people who are, I would say, directly correlated to what you do day to day. And these are the networks at the, as I call the sharp or the pointy end, which are critical. And they're the ones which you spend a lot of time, very often years cultivating, and these are friends. These are not just business contacts. These are people who you talk to frequently. You talk about different things. It may not be business, but they're the people you can rely upon. You might, sometimes you may actually go months without speaking to them, but you can always come back to them because there is that intrinsic underlying relationship that you have, and a common understanding, which means that, I could call such a person up today and say, listen, I need this. Can you help me with this? Can you put me in point me in the right direction? And they'll say, sure. And they'll be able to do it. That is very, very important. The region is, I would say, very sophisticated when it comes to legal, regulatory, commercial frameworks. And they have a place, and it's important from a governance and a transparency point of view that we have that. But having a network which can help you navigate all of that is even more important, and it allows you to expedite matters where otherwise you would have to, go through and figure it out for yourself. You still got to go through the process, but you've got to go through it from first principles. So the networks at all levels are critical.
Noted. Good to know. Jonathan, you and your firm help businesses in the Middle East hire best legal, technology, and HR professionals. How do you find the talent?
So there's 4 different levers really that we use for this, and I'll address each one individually. So number 1 is, over the last 35 years, we have a database, and that's not just from our office, that's from offices globally. And that's purely candidates who've approached us looking for a role, whether that may be across legal, technology, or HR. We've met them, interviewed them, really dug deep into finding out what their career aspirations are, what they're looking for, what their salary expectations are, and then even going on a more personal level, what their family situation is, how important is education allowance for us. So that's number 1 for us, because they are what we call good quality vetted individuals. And that's what our clients want. They want to know, okay, well, have you met this person? If so, how do they present? culturally would they fit into my organization? Some hiring managers may have certain characteristics or personalities they like to counter other people in their team, whatever it may be. Now, that's one thing that technology, hopefully, I'm trying to preserve my job, will never be able to get rid of, because humans, we know each individual's quirks and cultural benefits and all of that, and hopefully robots won't be able to spot that. So that's one of the big things for us. LinkedIn too, I touched upon it earlier. So a bit of a trade secret from a headhunter's perspective, we can pay for something called LinkedIn Recruiter. So LinkedIn Recruiter at the back end allows us to see every single individual on LinkedIn, and we can search by keywords, by location, by whatever it may be. Now, with that, we can then send a direct message to that person who is targeted for the job that we're looking for. So to give you a very clear example, if I'm instructed by a sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi asking for a corporate M&A lawyer, 2 years experience, then I can search on LinkedIn for all of those different characteristics. Once I get a short list of people who fit into that project, I can then send them all a message to say, hey, we're currently working on this role, would it be of interest? If it then is and they respond, then at that point we go back to the database piece, which we then conduct a full interview with them. If they're not in the country, nowadays it's on Microsoft Teams or on Zoom, but obviously the preference is meeting people for coffee or meeting them individually and in person. So again, that goes back to how important it is to have your LinkedIn up to date with certain keywords of whatever you do, because otherwise you are not maximizing your exposure to recruiters, because recruiters will use LinkedIn Recruiter. Most people, to be honest, if they're a smaller boutique agency, we're a global PLC and we've got offices in 27 countries, so we have a huge database. But if you are a 3-man agency sat in the Middle East somewhere, you probably will just have LinkedIn Recruiter as your default, because you won't have that 30 years of database. So that's why I'm saying LinkedIn is so vital to have it professionally completed for your profile. At the end of the day, that's nowadays your digital CV. Final 2 pieces. One of them, so adverts and job boards. To be honest with you, this is dying out a little bit. This used to be very, very important to people looking for jobs. Probably over the last 5 years, I would say it was still key. People would always go on Totally Legal or Bait or Gulf Talent or whatever this job board may be. They would then upload their CV and wait for that to be reviewed. Now, in the Middle East is the most active platform and geography in the world in terms of LinkedIn, in terms of job adverts. So again, if we post an advert, by 2 hours time, we'll probably have anywhere between about 500 and 1,000 applicants. 95% of those will not be relevant. So therefore, we don't have the time to look through 95% of not useful, irrelevant applicants. So unfortunately, again, as a bit of a tip, probably don't apply for jobs left, right, and center. It doesn't work as much as it used to. The best that you can do is the networking piece. Go back to speaking to the general counsels, the chief technology officers, whoever is the type of business or the hiring manager you're looking to get into. Build that personal relationship so that once an opportunity comes up in their team in the next year, 12 months, whatever it may be, then at least you're at the forefront of their mind. If you just apply to an advert with thousands of other applicants, you're not going to stand out at all. So that's probably the least effective talent attraction piece now. And the other one is referrals. So for us, again, it's so important. Every time we will speak to a very good individual, we will ask them, do you know anybody else that may be looking for a role? Because good people usually have worked with other good people or hang around with other good people. So for us, that's why it's so important, again, to have your network. Because if you are, as an example, Allen & Overy lawyer, you've worked with many other Allen & Overy lawyers. So keeping those good quality connections, again, will maximize your exposure to recruiters.
That's amazing, Jonathan. I think that was just a little mini course on how to sharp up some of your skills to know how to get found and to know where to be found. Amazing. Abdullah, what were some of the main challenges that you and your partners faced managing your KD international business across Saudi and I think your main office is in Sydney? And how did you manage to overcome those?
Thanks, Stream. Yeah. So different factors should be taken into consideration when starting an international venture. Among those socio-economical factors, as well as legal, government, legislation, a comprehensive fiscal analysis should be done before going abroad, so you can understand more about the region, about where you are investing. For us at KD International, me personally was starting my business in 2016, learning about Australian taxation system. For example, back then the tax in Saudi was also introduced. So it was a bit of a challenge to learn more about realities, systems. So you spend more time knowing how to manage your cash, how to manage your cash flow, how to manage your expenses, etc. Also, in that year, when we started the business, there were issues related to approving international education agents in Saudi. So it was something that was temporary, but it was challenging. So you would expect things that are out of the ordinary sometime, but you try to overcome them through working with your partners, with your relationship across the region to find a way on how to assist your client. The most important thing I want to point out that there is always challenges, gray areas which you need to learn more about them when doing business overseas. You need to spend some time more time reading and learning, asking experts in the field, and with patience and commitment, you could achieve your goal. Just make sure you focus on the main goal, on the business, on the core business, and it's always going to you're always going to achieve your. Are committed to it. Learn more about legals and all others. I mean, the Saudi system now is going through so much in terms of updating legals, and new legislations are coming through every 6 months, every year. So keeping up to date with that and adapting your business to that is very important.
Great, Abdullah, thanks. Yeah, legislations, I guess, across regions are very important to note, and that's something that we all need to consider. And that's probably the bit that the legal profession of our project has addressed in a couple of the sessions that we have on YouTube. Adam, you've been between both regions for about 18 years. So maybe you're classified as an Arab Australian or Australian Arab. How do you see the commercial and cultural bridges between both regions?
The commercial and cultural bridges are interesting in the sense that they are, from an outsider looking in, that they are generally quite underrated. But for people who have dealings between the two regions, it's actually quite a vibrant relationship on both a commercial and a cultural level. I mean, even on a diplomatic level, I mean, Australia has had a diplomatic presence in the region since 1975. So that was when the first embassy was established in Abu Dhabi. And even before then, from a cultural point of view, even going back to during the First and Second World War, where the populations of the various countries in the Gulf and the Levant, were supporting Australian troops who were going through the region. I mean, it goes back that far as well. So there is this intrinsic link between the two regions. But if you look at today, how that relationship is characterised, you have every conceivable sector which is covered. Anything from defence to agriculture to manufacturing to food security. And financial services. And it's not just about financial or capital flows. It's about flows of knowledge and expertise between both regions. So there's this common perception that the Middle East exports capital to Australia and Australia exports expertise to the Middle East. Now, that is true in part, and that's probably more of a historical characterization. But, today I would look at that and say, well, that's not necessarily the case. There are exports of capital from Australia to this region. There's exports of expertise from the Middle East to Australia. And that's because there is a shared understanding that, working together on various initiatives, working together, to improve, the lives of the populations in both regions, means coming together and actually pooling resources of all types. And it's actually a rare, from what I can see globally, it's a rare positive collaboration where there are no strings attached. It's simply focused on getting the best out of whatever joint venture you're working on, and to benefit both sides. And this is the beauty of it. You look at other relationships around the world. You look at US China, US Russia, Europe and the UK. Yes, there is cooperation, but there's always some sort of political angle to it, and there's always some sort of ulterior motive or agenda involved. Whereas Australia and the Middle East, you don't see any of that, and that's actually quite unique. So, and I know we'll probably get onto this a bit later, but the relationship now, from a financial point of view, is quite significant. From a cross-cultural point of view, where whether it's people like me who live in the region, or students who study in Australia, come back to the region, and then become ambassadors for Australia. That is something which is quite powerful. But there's more that can be done, and I won't go into that now because I know we'll probably talk about it later. But as it stands, it's a very powerful yet understated, under the radar relationship.
Great, thanks so much, Adam. Jonathan, so for anyone interested in working in the Middle East, what would be the hot areas or the skills that are currently, required in the region, or what's the market missing?
Yeah, we'll start with legal. I think that's probably the most relevant. So, fortunately, legal, we always say, is fairly either recession or pandemic proof, because as one part of legal may not be as busy, that just increases the other. So as an example, during the pandemic, there was no outward investment going on. So M&A lawyers were very quiet. However, on the flip side, employment lawyers or disputes lawyers were busier than they've ever been. So there's always some element of legal that is always super busy, and therefore is a hot topic. Now, for us, the legal framework here, particularly as an example, based in the DIFC, so it's an international free zone, is heavily based on common law. So therefore, the law firms or the companies are either looking for two different types of lawyers. One, an Arab lawyer who's got the language skills, the drafting skills within Arabic, or common law. So they either want a UK qualified, Aussie qualified, New Zealand qualified lawyer. So therefore, that's where there's a bit of a skill gap, because we are trying to attract people from Australia and from the UK in particular to come to the region. Australia is very strong in certain areas like projects work, infrastructure work. So therefore, there's a real demand for those type of lawyers coming from Australia, as they're frequently very well trained. They've worked on top infrastructure projects such as Sydney Metro or Parramatta, whatever it may be, and therefore they're in real need. Outside of legal, technology, this is just going gangbusters everywhere. This is not just the Middle East. I think there's a real big drive in particular from the sovereign wealth funds. Obviously, years ago, they took the decision to diversify away from oil. Tourism was probably the main thing they looked at there, with the hotels, the malls, all of that. They've probably slightly now gone towards the technology piece on that. So there's huge amounts of investment going into health tech, ed tech, ad tech, and then also e-commerce and digital has just gone crazy since COVID. It's funny because one thing that Dubai does very well is bricks and mortar. They do very well the malls, and the e-commerce piece was always kind of slightly secondary. They are still building malls. That plan hasn't changed, but I think the e-commerce piece has really, really taken off as well. So therefore, any form of technology professional is in demand here. Going back to what Adam mentioned about all the industries that Australia matches with, including the likes of defense, well, therefore, there's really specific work around cybersecurity, electronic security, all of that. Again, there's a real skill gap. So they are looking at a lot of the searches that we're requested to do are global. So whether that's Australia, it may be Eastern Europe, where there's a lot of this, but they don't seem to have that capability, certainly here in the region as of yet. Abu Dhabi government at the moment have got a big project. They've actually created divisions which are, their sole focus is to go around the world to find businesses from a technology perspective that they think will add value to the region. They then will bring them to the region. Their headquarters will be moved to Abu Dhabi. They will get heavily discounted rent, heavily discounted visas, and they will get a lot of financial investment, because they don't just want to give companies money and say, great, just give us a profit back in the next 5 years. They actually want to embed them into the Middle East. So on the back of that, there are new companies setting up in the region all the time, and therefore they need additional skills. So overall, I would say most areas are very busy. Oil and gas, renewables, technology, e-commerce, digital marketing, and legal, they're probably the busiest areas.
Great. I'm just going to follow up with Adam on what you just said, Jonathan. So you've just mentioned the skills and the hot areas required. So Adam, can you tell us what some of the key sectors, especially the ones that are not so obvious, where you see collaborations happening between both regions?
I'll talk about the not so obvious ones. So historically, it's been agriculture, i.e. Australia exporting agricultural products to the Middle East. Why? Because Australia is known for good quality, abundance of volume, and so can meet the demand of the region. The next evolution in that will be the technology around agriculture. Why is that? Both regions are relatively arid climates. Australia has had to endure that, on and off for, the last 200 years. Some seasons are great, some seasons are awful. And they've had to learn how to tame the environment to, ensure that they can produce enough to meet demand. So I see that there's going to be a lot in that space. Another area, we've seen a lot in terms of people who are qualified as medical specialists and nurses coming to the region. Why? Because Australia is known for, high quality training and accreditation. So that will continue. But I think also what we will see going forward is more collaboration in terms of medical devices and technology. Australia has a number of world leading companies who operate in this space. Examples are Cochlear, ResMed, and there are a few others. So I think there's going to be more collaboration in terms of exporting of expertise from Australia in that space into the region. The other area, which a lot of people don't think about, but it is quite important, is that we have a lot of sovereign wealth funds in the region, mainly in the Gulf states, but Australia has a lot of not sovereign funds, well, it has one sovereign fund, it has a lot of superannuation or pension funds. Now, the largest pension fund in Australia at the moment is around $250 billion. Now, that's the size of Investment Corporation of Dubai. It's not much smaller than Mubadala and ADQ in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, that's projected to grow to 500 billion in the next few years. So that puts it in, maybe not ADIA, but in public investment fund territory. So why is that important? Number one, those funds, those pension funds in Australia will have to, if not now, very soon, start to look at investment opportunities offshore. And they will look to dealing with counterparts who have, enough in terms of funds under management in order to pool those funds for a joint venture or a joint investment. But two, Australian pension funds will look to deal with counterparts who are well versed in investing across different sectors and different asset classes. The other thing also, which is important, is that Australia's pension fund industry is 30 years old. So they've been doing it a long time. And what that means is that the funds management industry in Australia is also, probably the third largest in the world. That will, I think, over time benefit the region, not only in terms of capital coming into the region from the pension funds in Australia, but the expertise in governance and accountability, which will also come from the funds management industry into this region, which will help grow that industry. And a number of governments, particularly in the Gulf, want to grow the size and the quality and the depth of capital markets in the region. The only way you're going to do that is by improving the governance, both in terms of the players in that space, be they fund managers or service providers, but also in terms of the governance around equity and debt capital markets, particularly securities exchanges. So that's another area where I think, which is not a lot of people think about, where it's going to become more and more important.
Great. Thanks so much, Adam. Abdullah, I want to come to you about the Aussie coffee you've brought into the region. So you've obviously opened up a coffee shop in Riyadh and brought Australian beans into the region. How has that experience been? And I'm definitely going to visit Aussie Cafe once I'm in Riyadh because I just missed that. But please do let us know how the experience has been so far.
Thanks, Reem. Yeah, you're always welcome, and everyone here is welcome to visit. Let me go back to a point that Adam mentioned earlier. Students and alumni from Australia, they play a key role in creating a value, a business between the two regions. They're under. You can create a great network by empowering the students, giving them the opportunity, and they will be ambassador for Australia for businesses between the two regions. The idea started with the coffee culture in Australia. So we see most of the Saudi community, Saudi students, the coffee culture within Australia. And we know that there's association between and coffee. Always businesses, networks start with a cup of coffee. You meet in a coffee shop, or you drink coffee together, or that's how you start a business and relationship in Saudi. And also we saw that similarity in Australia. So we thought about bringing the same coffee culture, the specialty coffee, the high quality roasting coffee beans from Australia. My business partner was very passionate about coffee. He was he wanted to do that for a long time. I said, let's do it. The international education business was drying out during COVID. We had 2 years lockdown, so we had to think outside the box. We thought of something that we could build business out of it. So coffee was on top of that list. So we started our coffee shop in Riyadh. We started to export. We learned so much about SFDA, the legalities around bringing food and beverages from overseas. You get all the approvals you need, and then you bring the food through customs, and you also follow up and wait some time. It's a learning cycle. We talk for the first 2-3 shipments that we get from Australia. And we're looking forward to expand that operation and bring more coffee food from also organic food from Australia. In the last year, 5 Australian coffee shops were open in Saudi. Ozzy Cafe, we have Kangaroo, we have Avo Cafe, we have Jacaranda Cafe, we have Kaya Cafe. So, and was all from alumni from Australia. So that's why I think what Adam mentioned is very important.
That's really great, Abdullah. And I know our good friend Mohammed Al-Kelbi is probably online watching us. I know that he has a lot of big craze for coffee, and it's great that when ideas come together, and especially from students who studied in Australia, just bringing a bit of smell of Australia back home. I have one final question for each one of you before we wrap up. Adam, I mean, we heard from Todd and Gary earlier this morning, and they talked a lot about what opportunities are between both regions. But how do you see the relationship between Australia and the Middle East developing and prospering over the next 10 years?
Well, I think with all the elements of the region, it's going to develop and prosper very well. So long may that continue.
Amen.
I think that, you know, when I looked at those not so obvious areas, I think they are going to be the impetus for the relationship becoming a lot more deeper and also even more meaningful than it is now. Now, I think from an Australian perspective, you know, there has been a historical relationship with Southeast Asia and China. That, from a geopolitical point of view, is shifting. And I've said this for 15 years to a lot of people in Australia. I said, look, yeah, you want to export to the world, you want to trade with the world, you have to trade with every part of the world, not just one part of the world. And people underestimate what this region can offer. You know, if you look at the region itself, and I'm now looking the next 10 years, you know, you look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia with, you know, I mean, look, everyone talks about Vision 2030. And you might look at it and go, it's gargantuan. I mean, how could it ever be done? But the fact is, in the last 5 years, since, you know, the Crown Prince announced Vision 2030 and, you know, all the subsets of that, it's being delivered. And it's not something which is going to happen overnight, but it is happening. And it's happening at many different levels. And I think from Australia's point of view, with the, you know, the massive projects that are taking place at the moment, I think there will be a place for, you know, Australian companies to help out in many different ways to achieve that vision. Because although Saudi Arabia has the financial and human capability, the projects are so big that it just needs everyone to pitch in. And I think because Australia is very well versed in large public works, be that, you know, rail, roads, mass transit, that's where that assistance will be critical. So that's when I look at the region itself. I also think that, you know, the Gulf particularly provides a very sophisticated and established platform for trading with the wider region. And there's the common saying that within 4 hours of the UAE, you've got a total addressable market of something like 2.5 billion people, and that remains true, and that will only increase, and that takes in India and other parts of the subcontinent. It takes in Central Asia. It takes in Africa, and I think Australian companies are more and more looking to this market as not only a market in itself, but also a market to trade with the wider region. And I think that will become critical as we pivot away, not completely, but more away from China and looking at other parts of the world which just have a lot of potential that hasn't been looked at before because their companies didn't need to, but also where there are some very strong ties at different levels which people just never realised. So I think the relationship will continue in the same way as it has for the last 20 years, but there will be some nuanced changes as well.
Great, Adam. Thanks so much. That was very insightful, and it kind of complements a lot of what Todd and Gary said at the beginning when we started. Jonathan, I mean, there's a bit of a saying going around that I've obviously seen and heard and noticed on LinkedIn, but maybe you can clarify that. How true is it that jobs and opportunities come through connections and networks more than they can come through recruitment agencies and websites?
Honest answer is I would say it's a blend of all of them. I don't think you could say, well, if I was to pick which are ahead of others, I would probably say connections and recruitment agencies are actually higher than websites. And that's going back to, again, what I touched upon before with certain companies. They will post their job ads on their career page, as an example. Now, an internal talent acquisition professional is not a specialist in legal, HR, finance, and all the different elements that they will have to recruit for. So on the basis of that, they could be inundated, especially if they're working for a big global business. They could be working on anywhere between 20 to 50 open job roles at any one time that they're trying to fill for their organization. So even if you just do the simple maths of how many times applications are made for each of those job ads for those 50 roles, that individual just simply does not have the time to go through every single CV. And therefore, unfortunately, a lot of good quality candidates may be sending their CV, but it just drops into a black hole because it's never actually looked at by the decision maker. It gets to the point where you're hoping your talent acquisition professional will find your CV, think that's suitable, put that forward to the right person. There's too many variables. Whereas if you have a connection or you have a network, you're just going direct to the source, because you may have a good relationship with a general counsel, as an example. The second he has a job, you're just speaking to him directly. You're not going through that extra layer of complexity to get your profile in front of them. And then the recruitment agency piece, so that's interesting because quite a lot of jobs will never actually be advertised, particularly if they're confidential. They will just go through a specialist recruitment agency. So that's why it's really important to have a strong network or relationship with certain recruitment agencies as well. Because as an example, particularly at the more senior end, we may be instructed by a CEO knowing that their general counsel is going to be leaving. So they will instruct us, rather than posting anything on LinkedIn because they might not want the market to know that that person's leaving, just purely to headhunt the right candidates from, it may be their competitors or wherever it may be. So therefore, you need to have a relationship with your recruitment agencies because you will never have access to that job. You will never find about it on their website. So I would certainly say a blend of those two is really key.
Great, good to know. Last question to Abdullah. I mean, congratulations to KD International, who've just won an Outstanding Performance Award in Student Recruitment for 2021. Now, the question that comes to mind is that how have you managed to stay in contact with your networks, which are all the universities across Australia and that region throughout the pandemic, Abdullah?
Thank you so much. So working closely with our university partners, with pathway providers, during the pandemic and after post-pandemic as well, we created tailored programs for students. For example, as mentioned previously by Flinders University, keeping up with the updates with what's needed in the region, the scholarship programs changes, also the demand in the market could help us and help the universities as well in creating a very good market and in the region. We worked with our pathway providers like Navitas Study Group, UP Education in doing so. And we had a successful run just post-COVID with helped us achieve that award.